You're too old for this kind of trip, Mom. My daughter-in-law, Amanda said, wrapping me in a hug that felt as thin and brittle as tissue paper. Just look after the house while we're gone. I smiled. I produced the same gentle, understanding smile I'd been practicing for the last 30 years. I waved as they piled their expensive luggage into the waiting taxi my son, Michael, his wife, Amanda, and my 2 teenage grandchildren. I watched them go, a perfect family portrait heading off for the Italian vacation of a lifetime, the one I had dreamed of my entire life, the one I had just paid for. I didn't cry. I kept waving until the car turned the corner, its engine noise fading into the quiet of the morning. Only then did I let my hand drop. I stood there for a moment on the porch, the air crisp, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue, a perfect day for a flight to Rome. Then I turned, walked back into the silent house, and went to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. It's what women like me do. We absorb the blows, the casual dismissals, the 1,000 tiny cuts of being told our time is over, and we make tea. We bring order to the chaos. I started tidying up the whirlwind of their departure, a stray sock, a discarded magazine, the coffee cups they'd left on the counter. And that's when I saw it. Sitting squarely in the middle of the dining room table, looking ridiculously out of place, was a thick, plastic document folder, Michael's. In his frantic rush to get his perfect family to the airport on time, my dutiful, forgetful son had left it behind. My first thought was a mild pang of annoyance. He'd probably need whatever was in there. My second thought was that he'd call in a panic from the airport, and I'd have to figure out how to get it to him. But a third thought, a quiet, curious little whisper, pushed the others aside. I picked up the folder. It felt heavy, important. I opened it, and my world tilted on its axis. Inside, neatly organized, were all the documents for the trip, the flight itineraries, the hotel confirmations, the travel insurance policies, the vouchers for guided tours of the Colosseum and the Uffizi Gallery, everything. And on the top of every single page, next to the booking confirmation number, was the name of the lead traveler. The name of the person under whom the entire reservation had been made, the name of the credit card holder who had paid for it all. My name, Carol Patterson. I sank into a chair, the folder open in my lap. The steam from my forgotten teacup rose in a lazy curl beside me. I saw the flights, business class. I saw the hotels, 5 stars, with suites overlooking the Arno in Florence and the Spanish Steps in Rome. I saw the total charge at the bottom of the final invoice, a number so large it made me feel a little dizzy. It had been my surprise gift to the family, my entire life's savings poured into one magnificent, shared dream. You're too old for this kind of trip, Mom. Amanda's voice echoed in the silent room, but now it sounded different, absurd, comical. She had pronounced me too frail to sit on a plane for which I had paid, too old to walk through a museum for which I held the tickets, too feeble to sleep in a hotel room that was booked in my name. They hadn't just left me behind. They had stolen my dream, my money, and my own name, and left me to water the plants. And I started to laugh. It wasn't a hysterical sound. It was a low, quiet, bubbling laugh that started deep in my chest. It was the laugh of a woman who had just been handed a get-out-of-jail-free card. The keys to the kingdom. My son, my weak, complicit, guilt-ridden son, had not just been careless. In his subconscious desire to sabotage a trip he knew was wrong, he had armed me. He had left the entire arsenal on the dining room table. The laughter subsided, replaced by a crystalline, diamond-hard clarity. The hurt, the sting of their casual cruelty, it all just evaporated. It was replaced by a thrilling, audacious, electrifying idea. My mind, which for years had been occupied with grocery lists and doctor's appointments, suddenly felt like the headquarters of a brilliant military strategist planning a coup. I looked at the clock on the wall. 8:15 a.m. Their flight was at 1:30 p.m. They would be at the airport now, checking their bags, feeling smug and successful. They would be sipping overpriced lattes, completely oblivious. They would walk up to the check-in counter, give the agent their names, and the agent would ask for the lead traveler. The person whose name was on the reservation, the person whose credit card had paid for it, the person who had to be physically present to authorize the tickets. A person who was currently sitting in her kitchen, drinking a cup of Earl Grey. My hand was steady as I picked up my phone. I scrolled through my contacts past Michael and stopped on the name that had been my anchor for 40 years. Elizabeth, my best friend. The one who had told me 100 times, "Carol, you do too much for them." I pressed the call button. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and cheerful. "Carol, I was just thinking about you. Did they get off okay?" "Oh, they got off all right," I said, and I could hear the giddy, unfamiliar thrill in my own voice. "Liz, I have a question for you, and I need you to answer it without thinking too much." "Okay," she said, intrigued. "How do you feel about spontaneous travel? Say, to Italy?" There was a beat of silence. "What are you talking about?" "Their flight is at 1:30 this afternoon, from the international terminal. I have 2 business class tickets with our names on them. Well, not yet, but they will in about 10 minutes. I have a 5-star hotel suite in Rome waiting, all paid for. All we have to do is pack a bag and show up." Another pause, this one filled with dawning comprehension. "Carol, what did you do?" "Nothing yet," I said, a wide grin spreading across my face. "But I'm about to. So, are you in or are you out?" I could almost hear the smile in her voice when she replied, "Carol Patterson, I have been waiting my entire life for you to ask me a question like that. I'm in. My God, I am so in." "Good," I said, my heart thrumming with a wild, youthful energy I hadn't felt in decades. "Pack your best dresses. I'll pick you up in an hour." I hung up the phone and stood up. The quiet house didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a launch pad. I had the tickets. I had the hotel vouchers. And I had a co-conspirator. All the pieces were in place. "You're too old for this kind of trip," they had said. I looked at myself in the reflection of the dark kitchen window. My eyes were sparkling. I didn't look old. I looked like a woman who was just about to begin the greatest adventure of her life. "We'll see about that," I whispered to my reflection. "Let's just see if you're adult enough to find your own way home." After I hung up with Elizabeth, I didn't allow myself a single moment of hesitation. Hesitation was a luxury I couldn't afford. The plan was in motion, and the timeline was tight. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline, the likes of which I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager sneaking out of my parents' house. For the next hour, my quiet suburban home became a high-stakes command center. My first move was the most critical, the travel offensive. I sat down at the dining table, the folder of documents spread before me like a battle map. I found the airline confirmation number and dialed the customer service line. The hold music was infuriatingly cheerful, a tinny pop song that grated on my nerves. Every second counted. Finally, a calm, professional voice answered. "Thank you for calling Atlantic Airlines. This is Maria. How can I help you?" I took a deep breath, channeling a level of serene authority I didn't know I possessed. "Good morning, Maria. My name is Carol Patterson. I'm calling about booking reference XYZ123. I'm the lead passenger and the cardholder on the reservation." "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. I have your file right here. A party of 4 traveling to Rome today. How can I assist you? I need to make a few last-minute changes to the passenger manifest, I said, my voice as smooth as cream. There's been a change of plans. Certainly, she said, her fingers clicking on a keyboard. What changes would you like to make? First, I began, I will still be traveling, of course. But my son and his wife, Michael and Amanda Patterson, will unfortunately not be able to make the trip. You can go ahead and remove their names from the booking. There was a brief pause. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, ma'am. Will you be canceling their tickets? No, not canceling, I said sweetly. Just reassigning one of them. My dear friend, Elizabeth Vance, will be joining me instead. I can give you her details now. As for the other ticket, let's just consider it a donation to the airline's profit margin. I could hear the smile in Maria's voice. She was probably used to dealing with frantic, hysterical travelers. My calm, surgical precision must have been a refreshing change. Very good, Mrs. Patterson. I can certainly do that for you. There will be a name change fee. Not a problem, Maria, I said, pulling my credit card from my wallet. Please, charge it to the card on file. As she processed the change, I moved on to the next phase of the operation. Now, about the hotel, I said, flipping to the voucher page. The reservation at the Hotel Bellagio in Rome is for 2 suites. I'd like to cancel one of them, the one reserved under Michael Patterson's name. My friend and I will be perfectly comfortable sharing the main suite, the one under my name. I can call the hotel's concierge desk directly for you, Mrs. Patterson, and handle that right now. You're a treasure, Maria, I said, and I meant it. In that moment, this anonymous voice on the other end of the phone was my most valuable ally. Within 10 minutes, it was done. Michael and Amanda Patterson had been digitally erased from their own vacation. Their seats on the plane now belonged to me, Elizabeth, and 2 very fortunate standby passengers. Their 5-star hotel room had vanished back into the ether. They were, in a word, stranded, and they didn't even know it yet. Step 1 was complete. Next was the financial lockdown. I immediately dialed the number on the back of my credit card. This call was even quicker. Hello, my name is Carol Patterson. I'd like to place a travel alert on my account. I'll be in Italy for the next 2 weeks. However, I added, my voice hardening slightly, I need you to do something else for me. I have 2 supplementary card holders on this account, Michael and Amanda Patterson. I want their cards deactivated immediately. You want to block them, ma'am? The agent asked. Block them, freeze them, cancel them. I want to ensure that any attempted transaction from this moment forward is declined. Can you do that for me? Yes, ma'am. Consider it done. Another click. Another cord cut. I imagined them at the airport, perhaps deciding to buy an expensive bottle of duty-free perfume, only to have the card unceremoniously rejected. The thought brought a wicked little smile to my face. The final step was the personal liberation. With the logistics handled, I flew upstairs to my bedroom. I pulled my old, dusty suitcase from the back of the closet. For years, my wardrobe had slowly morphed into a sea of beige, navy, and gray, sensible colors for a sensible older woman. But in the very back of my closet, behind a row of practical cardigans, was a dress I had bought on a whim 5 years ago. It was a vibrant, flowing silk dress, the color of a Tuscan sunset, deep oranges, rich purples, and fiery reds. I had worn it once to a family dinner, and Amanda had looked at me with that pitying little smile of hers and said, "Oh, Carol, it's a little loud, don't you think? At our age, we should aim for elegance, not attention." I had never worn it again. I pulled that dress out now. It felt like a whisper of my former self, the girl who had dreamed of Italian adventures before she became a wife and a mother. I laid it carefully on top of my packed clothes. It wasn't just a dress. It was a declaration of independence, a flag. I zipped the suitcase shut, my heart hammering with a joyful, reckless beat. I was packed and ready in under 30 minutes. As I carried my suitcase downstairs, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. "Boarding soon. Wish you were here, Mom. House looks great. Love you." I looked at the message and felt a complete, utter, and blissful lack of guilt. I typed a quick reply. "Have a wonderful trip, dear. Talk when you get back." It felt deliciously, wonderfully dishonest. I grabbed my purse, the folder of now amended documents, and my suitcase. As I walked out the front door into the bright morning sun, I took one last look at the quiet, tidy house. The house they had left me to look after. It was no longer my responsibility. I was no longer its caretaker. I was a tourist, a traveler, an adventurous. The drive to Elizabeth's house was a blur of giddy energy. She was waiting on her porch, her own suitcase at her feet, a massive grin on her face. She looked like she had just won the lottery. In a way, we both had. "Are we really doing this?" she whispered as she threw her bag in the back. "We are absolutely 100% doing this," I said, pulling away from the curb. We were two respectable women in our late 60s, embarking on the most irresponsible, impulsive, and glorious adventure of our lives. They thought my life was over. They thought my world had shrunk to the four walls of that house. They had no idea I was just about to inherit the earth, or at least a beautiful little slice of Italy. Driving to the airport with Elizabeth was like being teenagers again. We were giddy, breaking into fits of laughter for no reason at all. We blasted an old Motown station on the radio and sang along at the top of our lungs. The fear and hesitation had completely vanished, replaced by a pure, unadulterated sense of adventure. We were Thelma and Louise, except our getaway car was a sensible sedan, and our destination was a 5-star hotel, not the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We pulled into the departures terminal, and the sight of the bustling crowd, the rolling suitcases, the palpable energy of 1,000 journeys beginning, filled me with a thrill I hadn't felt in a lifetime. This was where life happened, and for the first time in forever, I was a participant, not a spectator. We checked our bags with a cheerful young man who complimented my Tuscan sunset dress, which I was wearing under a light jacket. "My, don't you two look like you're heading somewhere fabulous?" he said. "We are," Elizabeth beamed. "We absolutely are." With our boarding passes in hand, two beautiful, crisp pieces of paper with our names on them, we made our way toward security. I glanced at the departures board. Flight 714 to Rome was listed as on time. It was 11:45 a.m. I knew, with a delicious certainty, that my family's idyllic airport experience was about to come to a screeching, grinding halt. I imagined them finishing their coffees, gathering their carry-ons, and making their way to the gate, full of blissful self-satisfaction. The first call came just as Elizabeth and I were taking our laptops out of our bags at the security checkpoint. It was Michael. My phone buzzed insistently in my purse. My first instinct, the old, ingrained maternal habit, was to answer it. But I saw Elizabeth catch my eye and give me a small, firm shake of her head. I let it ring. I was placing my shoes in the plastic bin when a text message came through. "Mom, where are you? We're at the gate, but the agent says there's a problem with the tickets. Call me." A problem with the tickets. It was a beautiful, elegant understatement. I felt a small, wicked grin play on my lips. I didn't reply. The real storm hit when Elizabeth and I were on the other side of security, gathering our things. My phone began to vibrate with a frantic, unceasing rhythm, call after call after call from Michael. He was in full-blown panic mode now. I could picture the scene so vividly. It was like I was watching it on a screen. I imagined him at the gate agent's counter, his face a mask of confusion and rising anger. Amanda would be standing beside him, tapping her foot impatiently, my grandchildren looking bored and embarrassed. The gate agent, a calm, unflappable woman in a crisp uniform, would be looking at her screen with a polite, professional frown. "I'm sorry, Mr. Patterson," I could hear her saying, "but your names are no longer on the passenger list for this flight." "What are you talking about?" Michael would sputter. "That's impossible. The reservation is for 4 people. "I understand, sir," the agent would reply, her voice maddeningly calm. "But the booking was amended this morning. The lead passenger and card holder, a Miss Carol Patterson, changed the reservation. The seats are now assigned to Miss Patterson and a Miss Elizabeth Vance. They have already checked in." The explosion of comprehension, of sheer, unadulterated horror on their faces must have been a sight to behold. The realization that their rock-solid, foolproof plan had not just failed, but had spectacularly backfired. The humiliation of it, standing there in front of a line of other passengers, stripped of their vacation. My phone was still buzzing, a furious, desperate insect in my purse. The calls were now interspersed with frantic texts. "Mom, pick up the phone, this isn't funny." "What did you do?" "The agent said you canceled our tickets." "Amanda is going to kill me. We're stuck at the airport. Call me. Now." Elizabeth and I found a quiet corner near our gate. We ordered 2 celebratory glasses of Prosecco. As the bubbles danced in my glass, I knew it was time for my final move, the coup de grace. I couldn't leave them in suspense forever. They deserved an explanation, just not the one they wanted. I took out my phone. I ignored the dozens of missed call notifications. I opened my messages. I took a photo. A simple, clear photo of my boarding pass lying on the table next to my glass of sparkling wine. The name Carol Patterson was clearly visible, along with the destination, Rome. Underneath the photo, I typed a single, simple message. "Amanda was right. I'm too old for a trip with you all." So I decided to go with a friend instead. "The hotel suite is lovely, by the way. Have a wonderful day. Ciao." I read it over once. It was perfect. I hit send, and then, with a feeling of profound and utter liberation, I powered my phone off completely. The buzzing stopped. The frantic demands, the anger, the manipulation, it all went silent. I had hung a do not disturb sign on my entire life. Elizabeth raised her glass. "To Carol Patterson," she said, her eyes shining with admiration. "The woman who finally decided to book a flight for herself." "To us," I corrected her, clinking my glass against hers. "To new adventures." I took a sip of the cold, crisp Prosecco. For a fleeting moment, a pang of guilt hit me. He was still my son. I had left him stranded, humiliated, and penniless in an airport terminal. A mother's heart is a stubborn, foolish thing. But then I thought about Amanda's thin, condescending hug. I thought about the casual cruelty of her words. I thought about the years I had spent making myself smaller so they could feel bigger. And the guilt evaporated like morning mist. It was replaced by a deep, resonant certainty. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. I had chosen my own happiness, my own adventure, my own life, over their comfort and convenience. For the first time, I had put myself first. The boarding announcement for Flight 714 to Rome echoed through the terminal. Elizabeth and I gathered our things and walked toward the gate, our steps light. We handed our boarding passes to the agent. She smiled. "Enjoy your flight, ladies." As I stepped onto the jet bridge, I felt the last 20 years of quiet servitude just fall away from me. I was no longer a caretaker, a babysitter, an unpaid chef, or an invisible benefactor. I was Carol, and I was on my way to Italy. The flight to Rome was an experience in itself. Elizabeth and I were seated in spacious, comfortable business-class seats, the kind that recline into actual beds. A smiling flight attendant offered us champagne before we even took off. I thought about Michael and Amanda, likely crammed into a taxi for a long, silent, and excruciatingly awkward ride home from the airport, and I took a long, unapologetic sip of my drink. I had spent a lifetime making sure everyone else was comfortable. It was my turn. We landed in Rome feeling rested and exhilarated. A car I had arranged for a perk of the original booking was waiting to take us to the hotel. Driving through the ancient, sun-drenched streets, I felt a sense of wonder so profound it almost brought me to tears. This was the city I had read about, the place I had dreamed of seeing since I was a girl. And I was finally here, not as a tag-along, not as a tolerated burden, but as the master of my own adventure. Our suite at the hotel was breathtaking. It was larger than my entire downstairs at home, with a small private terrace that overlooked a beautiful piazza. A complimentary bottle of chilled Prosecco and a bowl of fresh fruit were waiting for us. Elizabeth and I just stood in the middle of the room, laughing. It was all so absurdly, wonderfully perfect. For the next 24 hours, I kept my phone turned off. It was a conscious decision. I wanted to be fully present in my new reality, to immerse myself in the sights and sounds of Rome without the angry, buzzing ghost of my old life intruding. We walked for hours, getting delightfully lost in the labyrinth of cobblestone streets. We ate gelato, we tossed coins in the Trevi fountain, we sat at a small cafe in the afternoon and just watched the world go by, feeling utterly, completely free. But I knew I couldn't keep the phone off forever. The final act of my little drama had yet to be played. It wasn't enough to have escaped. I needed to send a clear, unequivocal message that this was not a temporary rebellion. This was a permanent revolution. The next afternoon, Elizabeth and I found a perfect little rooftop bar near the Spanish Steps. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the city. We ordered 2 glasses of Aperol Spritz, their brilliant orange color almost glowing in the fading light. We were laughing about something I don't even remember what when Elizabeth picked up her phone. "We have to commemorate this moment," she said. "The first sunset of our new lives." She snapped a photo. It wasn't posed. It was a candid shot of 2 women, their faces creased with genuine, uninhibited laughter, their glasses raised in a toast against a backdrop of ancient, beautiful rooftops. We looked happy. We looked free. We looked, I thought, anything but old. "That's the one," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. I knew, with perfect clarity, what I had to do. I finally took out my own phone and turned it on. The digital onslaught was immediate. It was like opening a floodgate. Hundreds of notifications poured in. Missed calls from Michael, missed calls from my grandchildren, voicemails, and a long cascading waterfall of text messages. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't read the texts, which I could see were a chaotic jumble of fury, pleading, and accusation. I simply cleared all the notifications, wiping the slate clean. My inbox was now empty. My phone was silent. The past had no voice here. Then, I opened my social media app. It was something I rarely used, mostly just to see photos of my friends' grandchildren. My own profile was a quiet, modest collection of pictures of my garden and my cat. I hadn't posted anything in over a year. I selected the photo Elizabeth had just taken, the one of us laughing against the Roman sky, and then I wrote a caption. I thought about it for a long time, choosing the words with the same care I would use for a recipe. They had to be perfect, simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. Finally, I typed, decided to finally start enjoying my retirement. Turns out, Italy is absolutely beautiful at this age. Feeling blessed. I added a little Italian flag emoji at the end. Then I tagged Elizabeth, and then, with a steady finger, I hit post. The effect was instantaneous and more powerful than any angry phone call or tearful confrontation could ever have been. It was a public declaration. It wasn't whispered in the confines of a family argument. It was announced to the world. It told everyone, my friends, my distant relatives, and most importantly, my son and his wife, that I was not a victim. I was not a sad, abandoned old woman sitting at home. I was a vibrant woman on a glorious European vacation, and I was having the time of my life without them. The post took away their narrative. They could no longer paint me as the crazy, vindictive mother who had ruined their trip, because the photo told a different story. It told a story of joy, friendship, and liberation. It made them look small, petty, and foolish. Who could argue with a happy woman enjoying her retirement? I watched as the likes and comments started to roll in. You go, Carol! Looks amazing! You deserve it! So happy for you! My old life was being publicly, definitively buried under an avalanche of cheerful validation. Elizabeth was watching me, a look of profound respect in her eyes. Checkmate, she whispered. Checkmate, I agreed, taking a sip of my drink. I did not feel a shred of guilt. Looking at that photo, at the genuine joy on my own face, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen life. I had chosen laughter. I had chosen the Tuscan sunset dress. That woman in the picture was the person I was always meant to be, before I was told to be quiet, to be sensible, to be old. I left the post up. I didn't engage with the comments. I just let it sit there, a bright, cheerful, unanswerable statement. It was my flag, planted firmly in the soil of my new, self-determined life. The conversation was over. I had won, not by arguing, but simply by being happy. And I knew, with a certainty that warmed me more than the Italian sun, that I would never, ever go back to being the woman who just stayed home and looked after the house. Her tour of duty was over. Mine was just beginning. After I made that final social media post, a profound sense of peace settled over me. It was as if I had finally closed a very long, very heavy book. The story of Carol, the caretaker, was finished. Now I could finally begin writing a new one. Carol, the traveler. The next 2 weeks were, without exaggeration, the best of my adult life. Elizabeth and I moved through Italy not like tourists on a frantic schedule, but like two women sipping a rare, exquisite wine. We wanted to taste every drop. The original itinerary, the one I had so carefully planned for my family, was still in the folder. It was a good plan, full of famous museums and historical sites, and we used it as a gentle suggestion rather than a rigid set of rules. We spent 5 days in Rome, and I felt like I was walking through the pages of a history book. But it wasn't just about the grandeur of the Colosseum or the hushed divinity of the Sistine Chapel. It was about the small moments, the profound, simple joy of sitting on the sun-warmed stone steps of a forgotten fountain, eating a lemon gelato so intensely flavorful it made my whole mouth tingle. It was about buying a beautiful silk scarf from a street vendor, the vibrant blue color a defiance against the years of beige I had draped myself in. I remember one morning in particular. Elizabeth had gone off to explore a small art gallery she'd read about, and I was on my own. I found a tiny table at a cafe in Piazza Navona. I ordered a cappuccino, a real one, with a thick, velvety foam that held its shape in a flaky cornetto filled with pistachio cream. And I just sat there. For a full hour, I did nothing but watch the world unfold. I watched the artists setting up their easels, the children chasing pigeons, the stylish Roman women walking with an effortless grace. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an observer watching a life that wasn't mine. I was a part of it. I was the woman in the pretty blue scarf sipping her coffee in a Roman piazza. I was not Michael's mother. I was not Amanda's mother-in-law. I was not a free babysitter or a silent benefactor. I was Carol, a woman who loved good coffee and people watching. I had forgotten she even existed. Sitting there, with the warm sun on my face, I felt as if I was meeting an old, dear friend for the first time in decades, myself. From Rome, we took a high-speed train to Florence. The suite I had booked, the one I had originally imagined my grandchildren running around in, was magnificent. It had a balcony that overlooked the River Arno, and every evening, Elizabeth and I would sit out there, drinking a glass of Chianti and watching the Ponte Vecchio light up as dusk fell. In Florence, I rediscovered my love for art, but I also discovered something else, a love for good leather. One afternoon, we wandered into a small, family-run workshop that smelled richly of tanned hides and beeswax. The artisan, an old man with hands as gnarled as an olive tree, was crafting a wallet. I watched him, mesmerized by the precision of his work. I had been using the same worn, sensible wallet for 15 years. It was full of faded pictures of my grandchildren and crumpled receipts. It was the wallet of a practical, invisible woman. On an impulse, I pointed to a wallet on his display shelf. It was made of a soft, buttery, deep red leather, stitched with perfect, even threads. It was elegant, luxurious, and utterly impractical. I bought it. Back in our hotel room, I performed a small, significant ritual. I took everything out of my old wallet. I threw away the old receipts. I kept one small photo of my grandchildren, but I placed my own driver's license in front of it. Then I transferred my money and my credit cards, my cards now solely under my control, into the new, beautiful wallet. Closing the clasp felt like closing a deal with myself. It was a physical symbol of the new order. From now on, I was in charge of my own resources, my life, my money, my choices. Our final stop was a small villa we rented for a few days in the Tuscan countryside. This was the part of the trip I had been most excited about, and it was more magical than I could have ever imagined. The air was thick with the scent of cypress trees and wild rosemary. We spent our days reading in the garden, taking long walks through vineyards, and learning to cook proper Italian pasta from the villa's owner, a wonderful, robust woman named Sophia who treated us like long-lost sisters. One evening, Sophia, Elizabeth, and I were sitting on the terrace, sharing a simple dinner of homemade pasta with fresh tomato and basil sauce. The sun was setting over the rolling hills, painting the sky in the same vibrant colors as my loud silk dress. We were talking and laughing, three women from different worlds, united by good food and good company. In that moment, a profound sense of peace washed over me. I thought of the house back home, the one I was supposed to be looking after. I thought of Michael and Amanda. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet, detached pity. They were somewhere far away, living in their world of transactions and perceived slights, and I was here, in paradise. They hadn't just lost a vacation. They had lost this feeling of connection, of simple, unadulterated joy. They had chosen a 5-star hotel over the person who was paying for it. And in doing so, they had revealed their own profound poverty. They had told me my life was over. They had sentenced me to a quiet, gray retirement of babysitting and gardening. But sitting there, with the taste of good wine on my tongue and the sound of my best friend's laughter in my ears, I knew the truth. My life wasn't over. It had just been on hold, waiting for me to be brave enough to press play. And the music, I discovered, was more beautiful than I had ever dared to dream. Coming home was a strange experience. The 2 weeks in Italy had felt like a lifetime, and stepping back into the familiar quiet of my old house was like putting on a coat that no longer fit. It was comfortable, yes, but it was also tight in the shoulders, restrictive. The house, which had once been my entire world, now felt like a beautifully decorated cage. I saw the indentations on the sofa where I used to sit for hours, waiting. I saw the kitchen where I had cooked 1,000 meals for people who took them for granted. I saw a life I had outgrown. I knew, with the same certainty that had propelled me to the airport, that I could not stay. This house was not my home anymore. It was their home, and I was no longer its unpaid live-in caretaker. Elizabeth, my wonderful, steadfast friend, helped me. We spent the next month in a whirlwind of activity. We found a small, bright, 2-bedroom apartment in a lovely complex on the other side of town. It had a balcony for flowers and was close to a library and a park. It was a space for one person with a guest room, always ready for a friend. While the sale of my large family house was being arranged, we packed up my life. It was another ritual of shedding the past. I kept my books, my photos, my mother's china, but the endless collection of things I had kept for the family was sorted, donated, or given away. I was packing for the life I wanted to live, not the one I had left behind. Throughout this entire time, my phone was quiet. The digital storm had passed. I had made my statement, and there was nothing more to say. Michael, I'm sure, was grappling with the new reality. He had to face the consequences of his actions, the humiliation, the financial mess of getting home, the cold, hard fact that his mother had a spine of steel. I knew he would eventually have to face me. He showed up one Saturday afternoon, just as Elizabeth and I were unpacking the last box of books in my new apartment. He didn't call first. He just appeared at the door, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a deep, weary shame. I let him in. I made him a cup of tea, the old habits dying hard, but I didn't fuss over him. I sat opposite him in my new armchair, and I waited. Elizabeth quietly made her excuses and retreated to the guest room, giving us our space. "Mom," he began, his voice low, I am so sorry." He talked for a long time. He apologized for Amanda's words, for his own weakness, for taking me for granted, for everything. He cried. I believe his tears were genuine. I believe his remorse was real. The boy I had raised was still in there, somewhere, underneath the weak-willed man he had become. I listened patiently, without interrupting. When he was finally finished, his confession hanging in the quiet, sunlit room, I took a sip of my tea. "I hear you, Michael. I said, and my voice was kind, but it was not the voice of the mother he had known. It was the voice of an equal. And I love you. You are my son, and I will always love you. But the woman you thought was your mother, she doesn't exist anymore. She retired. He looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, I said, that I will no longer be your family's emergency plan. I will no longer be your bank. I will no longer be your free babysitter or your house sitter. That job has been made redundant. Our relationship from now on is going to be a different one. It's going to be one based on respect. If you want to see me, you will call. If you want to have dinner, you will invite me. But you will not assume my time, my money, or my life belong to you. I stood up and walked over to the large empty wall in my new living room. Tacked right in the center was a brand new, beautiful world map. A single, bright red pin was pushed into the heart of Italy. I have plans, Michael, I said, my back to him. Elizabeth and I are thinking of a river cruise down the Danube next spring, and I've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms in Japan. He came and stood beside me, looking at the map. He saw the single red pin, and he understood. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of intent. I understand, he said quietly. He finally got it. The old, comfortable, convenient mom was gone for good. In her place was this new woman, a woman with a world map and plans that didn't include him. He left soon after that. The hug at the door was different. It was hesitant, respectful. It was the hug of a man who was meeting his mother for the very first time. After he was gone, I stood in my new living room, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. The air smelled of cardboard boxes and new beginnings. I looked at the map on my wall, at all the vast, unmarked spaces, all the possibilities. They had told me I was too old for travel. They had told me my life was over, that my world should shrink to the size of a single suburban house. But they were wrong. It turned out I wasn't too old for a trip. I was just too old to keep living someone else's life. My own was just beginning, and I had a whole world to see.